Think of a memory from your childhood, something vivid, a birthday, a trip, a moment with someone you loved. You can see it, the colors, the sounds, maybe even how you felt standing there. You'd swear it happened exactly like that. But here's the problem. There's a good chance it didn't. Not exactly. Maybe not at all. And the strangest part, your brain can't tell the difference because memory isn't a recording. It's a reconstruction. And every single time you remember something, you're not playing back a tape. You're rebuilding it from scratch. This isn't a flaw in some people's brains. It's how every brain on Earth works, including yours. Let's go back to where this all started. In 1932, a British psychologist named Frederic Bartlett ran an experiment that should have changed everything. He read people a strange Native American folk tale called The War of the Ghosts, then asked them to recall it days, weeks, even years later. What he found was strange. People didn't just forget details, they invented new ones. They smoothed out confusing parts. They added things that made the story make sense to them, things that were never in the original at all. And here's the part that mattered most. The people doing this had no idea they were doing it. They weren't lying. They were completely confident their version was accurate. Bartlett called this reconstructive memory. Your brain doesn't store an experience like a video file. It stores fragments, impressions, emotions. Then, every time you recall it, your brain rebuilds the scene using those fragments, plus whatever else happens to be floating around in your head at that moment. Which means every memory you have has been edited. Probably many times, by you without your permission. And the longer ago something happened, the more editing has taken place. Not because the memory fades evenly, like a photograph left in the sun, but because every time you've thought about it since, your brain has quietly swapped out a piece here, smoothed over a gap there, and saved the new version as if it were the original. You don't notice any of this happening. There's no warning label, no little flag that pops up saying this part was added later. The edited version simply feels exactly as real as the parts that actually happened, but Bartlett's work sat quietly for decades. It took one woman to show the world exactly how far this could go. In the 1970s, psychologist Elizabeth Loftus started running experiments that would eventually shake the entire legal system. In one famous study, she showed participants a video of a car accident. Afterward, she asked them how fast the cars were going when they hit each other. Except some participants were asked a slightly different question. How fast were the cars going when they smashed into each other? One word. That's it. One word changed. The people who heard smashed estimated significantly higher speeds. And a week later, when asked if they'd seen broken glass at the scene, the smashed group was far more likely to say yes. There was no broken glass. There was no broken glass in the video at all. Their brains had filled in a detail that fit the story, and then stored that invented detail as if it had actually happened. Loftus didn't stop there. In one of her most well-known studies, she worked with families to plant a completely false childhood memory. The story was simple. As a child, the participant had gotten lost in a shopping mall, cried, and was eventually rescued by an elderly man. It never happened. Loftus made it up, but after a few sessions of gentle prompting, around a quarter of participants didn't just believe the story. They elaborated on it. They described what the man looked like, how scared they felt, what their mother said when they were reunited. They built an entire emotional memory around an event that existed only in someone else's suggestion. And here's what should unsettle you. The participants who developed these false memories couldn't tell them apart from real ones. Not with more thought, not with more time. The fake memory felt exactly the same as a real one, because to the brain, there is no difference in how it's stored. So why does this happen? Why would evolution build a memory system this unreliable? In 2000, a neuroscientist named Karim Nader ran an experiment on rats that gave us the answer. And it's stranger than anyone expected. Nader trained rats to fear a certain sound by pairing it with a mild shock. Then, later, he reactivated that memory by playing the sound again, and right after, he gave the rats a drug that blocks the formation of new memories. If memory worked like a hard drive, this shouldn't matter. The memory was already saved. Reading it back shouldn't erase it. But that's not what happened. The rats forgot the fear completely. The act of remembering had made the memory vulnerable again. For a brief window, it was unlocked, malleable, open to being rewritten or even erased. Then it got resaved, but in a slightly different form. Scientists call this reconsolidation, and it doesn't just happen in rats, it happens every time you remember anything. Every time you recall a memory, you're not retrieving the original. You're pulling up the last version you rebuilt and then rebuilding it again, right now, influenced by your current mood, your current beliefs, and everything you've learned since. which means the version of your 10th birthday you remember today isn't the version you remembered 5 years ago. It's a copy of a copy of a copy, and each copy has been quietly edited by the person you've become since. Think about what that actually means for the big memories, the ones you've replayed the most, the argument that still bothers you, the compliment that meant everything, the moment you think defines who you are. Those are exactly the memories that have been reconstructed the most times, which means, statistically, they're probably the least accurate memories you have. The ones you trust the most are the ones most likely to have drifted the furthest from what actually happened. This is why eyewitness testimony, the thing courtrooms have relied on for centuries, turns out to be shockingly unreliable. Studies have found that mistaken eyewitness identification is a factor in a huge percentage of wrongful convictions later overturned by DNA evidence. People stood in court, looked a jury in the eye, and confidently described events that their own brains had quietly rewritten. It gets even darker than that. Researchers have found that with the right combination of pressure, suggestion, and repetition, people can be led to falsely confess to crimes they never committed, and even come to genuinely believe they did it. Not lying to avoid punishment, actually remembering committing an act that never took place, complete with invented details about how it felt and what they were thinking. If a memory that detailed and that emotional can be built entirely from suggestion, what does that say about the memories you've never had any reason to question? It's also why entire groups of people can share a vivid memory of something that never happened. The internet has a name for this now, the Mandela Effect. Thousands of people swear a certain cartoon character wore glasses, or a movie line was said a certain way when neither is true. It's not a glitch in the universe, it's a glitch in memory itself, just happening to a lot of people at once, often because the same false detail gets repeated and reinforced until it feels like a fact. So here's where that leaves you. That childhood memory you started this video thinking about, the one you were so sure about. Some of it is probably true, but some of it has almost certainly been smoothed over, filled in, or quietly rewritten every single time you've taken it out and looked at it again. Not because something is wrong with you, because that's what a memory is, not a record of what happened. A story your brain keeps retelling itself, getting a little less accurate and a little more yours every time. And maybe that's not entirely a bad thing. A perfect, unchanging recording of every painful moment you've ever lived through sounds less like a gift and more like a punishment. The fact that memory bends, softens, and reshapes itself might be the same mechanism that lets people move on from grief, let go of old versions of themselves, and grow into someone new. But it also means the line between remembering and imagining is far thinner than it feels. Every time you picture the future, you're using the exact same machinery your brain uses to reconstruct the past. Which raises an odd question. If your memories are partly invention and your imagination is partly memory, how much of what you call you is actually something your brain just made up and decided to keep? So the next time you're absolutely certain about something you remember, it's worth asking. Certain about what actually happened, or certain about the version of the story you've told yourself the most times.